Welcome to No Tourists Allowed, a podcast where two travel industry executives with a combined 71 years on the inside of travel and technology give up their secrets to do the thing everyone wants to do. Travel better, pay less, and see more of the world. Here are your hosts, Mike Putman and James Ferrara.
Hello, everyone. This is Mike Putman.
And this is James Ferrara. Buongiorno tutti.
Buongiorno.
Mike and I are just back from Paradise on Earth in southern Italy, the Amalfi Coast, specifically Sorrento. So we're going to be talking to you a bit about that. We have a lot to say. There was a lot of food, a lot of wine. Oh, and we did some business too, I think, Mike.
Yeah, it's an exciting trip. Glad to be back, and we'll be sharing more about our escapades a little bit later on in the podcast. But first, I want to announce our guest. We're very privileged to have a highly respected man in our industry, Mr. Cory Garner. He has 20 years of experience with American Airlines. He was a senior executive with their distribution side of the business. He's also helped, since leaving American, has helped over a dozen airlines with their revenue strategy and distribution strategy. He's a travel industry consultant and one that specializes in airline distribution, which is a lot of what we talk about on this show. So, Cory, welcome so much to No Tourist Allowed.
Glad to be here with you, Mike, and also James. Really a pleasure.
Thanks, Cory. We met you a little while back, and you've got a big name in the industry as being a guy who can explain a lot of what mystifies the rest of us in the world of airlines. But before we get to that, and I know that's a big tease for our audience, before we get to that, we are going to put you through the gauntlet with Mike. He does this with all of our guests. We're going to ask you a little bit about your personal travel habits, because we know that you've been around the world probably a number of times. You're a frequent traveler. So our listeners are really interested to hear about some of your preferences and some of the choices you make.
Absolutely. So I'll just ask you a series of questions, and if you just give us a one-word answer or maybe a short answer, we'll move through these rapid fire. So first of all, Cory, what is your favorite destination?
Turks and Caicos.
All right. That's a good choice.
That's a good one. Yeah.
And what is your favorite hotel? It could be an individual hotel, could be a chain that you've stayed.
Oh, favorite hotel. Oh, my goodness. There's so many to choose from. One of our favorites right now is the Park Hyatt Beaver Creek.
All right. That's a good one. Yeah, for sure. Are you a cruiser, Cory?
I have cruised a bit, yeah.
Okay. What's your favorite cruise line or cruise ship?
I've got little kids now, so it's Disney.
Disney. Okay.
Yeah.
Before you had kids, what was your favorite?
Oh gosh, anything that took me where I needed to go. I really like Southern Caribbean, so any of the Royal Caribbeans of the world, I would have taken to that part of the world.
All right. And when you travel, are you an aisle or a window guy?
Definitely window. I can't sit next to the window person who wants to keep the shade down the whole time, so it's really a battle of control.
No. Well, that's somewhat unique, James. Almost everyone's an aisle person.
Yeah, people want the extra room or the ability to get up and move around, but I get it. I've had a few annoyances with that when I'm trying to watch a movie and people have it up, or people have it down, and you want a little sunlight. So.
And one last one, Cory, carry on or checked?
Oh, definitely carry on. I come from the airline business, and as a standby, you can't check bags. Otherwise, you get there and your bags don't.
Very good. Very good. Well, thanks for answering those questions. That gives our listeners a little, insight to your travel preferences, just for a bit of context. But Tell our listeners a little bit about your backstory, your background, Corey.
Yeah, I spent most of my career at American Airlines. Actually, started as a finance guy doing budgets for Chicago O'Hare's airport, and then it wasn't too long after that that I found myself in this strange world called sales and distribution strategy, where I looked after Americans' relationships with the GDSs. And I have the distinction of writing the first email in the industry on the topic of something called NDC, which American originated back in 2006 as a GDS disruptor and has gotten a lot of headlines since then. Um, and so after I left American right at the beginning of COVID, I took all of that expertise I'd built up in the area of airline distribution. I shared it with as many airlines as I could. And so I've been involved in a lot of the transformation that's occurred in how airlines do business with GDSs and travel agencies all over the world.
Well, interesting. So you've been at the forefront of a lot of these NDC conversations with other airlines as well.
Let's tell the audience for a minute what that means, NDC, and what this latest story in distribution has been.
Yeah. So the easiest way to think about NDC is actually forget everything you know about the airline business. The easiest way to think about it is actually think about how your life has changed as it relates to consuming media in your house over a period of time. 25 years ago, everybody had a TV connected to a cable box, and the only way you were going to get TV was through that cable box, right? And what changed over a period of time as fiber optic internet came into play, everybody started to get more choices beyond just the cable box to get access to content. And some of that content could come directly from the content provider, like Disney Plus, for example, which we use a lot of in our house. The same thing has happened in the airline business over time. If you think about it, airline fares are kind of content, and airlines have to go through a lot of the same decisions and have taken advantage of a lot of the same uh, technologies as Disney has to create the option to distribute content directly to the outside world and not just through the cable boxes, which we call GDSs in the airline distribution business. And so NDC, that's just three letters. It stands for new distribution capability. But what it really means is it creates the option for an airline to distribute its content directly to the outside world through travel agencies. And to do that by providing a much wider array of content than they ever did before.
And just one more step back, if you don't mind, can you explain what the GDSs are to our audience as well?
Sure. GDS stands for Global Distribution System. And there are three major GDS companies in the world called Sabre, Travelport, and Amadeus. A lot of people have heard of them, even if you've never dealt with them directly. And those GDSs were actually originally created by airlines a long time ago, many decades ago, and were some of the first electronic marketplaces where travel agencies could get access to airline fares and sell airline tickets to the general public. It was very transformational for its time, but over a period of time, technology has moved on, and there have been different points in history where the technology the airlines were using outside of the GDS was outstripping what was happening inside the GDS. And so that created a little bit of a rub between airlines who wanted to move on with less expensive, more capable technology, and GDSs that were still managing most of the transactions, were a gatekeeper for most of the transactions with travel agencies using technology from a different decade. And so GDSs are a big aggregator of content, not unlike the cable boxes that we all dealt with not too long ago in our own houses.
Well, it's a great analogy. And just like in that analogy that we understand so well, television, where we used to have just a handful of channels and then a handful of cable networks, now we have thousands of channels and hundreds of streaming services, and it's all become very complex. Fares for airlines have become very complex too, right?
That's true. Yeah, fares are no longer just for point A to point B travel. Fares have become unbundled. Some services are purchased separately now. Some have been rebundled with different versions of fares. You've got different classes of service, different kinds of airlines, different combinations of airlines and airline alliances. Yeah, it's become.
And now seats and premium seats and uh, uh, special access and clubs and uh, everything, right? I mean, it's amazing, really. And so this new way of distributing that content is kind of the world that we're in now. What are some of the controversies, Cory, in this new world?
So the controversies, it's kind of interesting. The way the market has digested this trend towards NDC has been very different depending upon whether you're looking at the leisure side of the market or the corporate side of the market. They have very different issues between the two. So about a decade ago, maybe as far as 15 years ago, the leisure side of the market and online travel agencies in particular started their work of digesting the NDC trend for two reasons. One, they don't make most of their money on air. In fact, less than 10% of the money they make is from airlines. 90% or more is directly or indirectly from hotels. So if you're an online travel agency, you want the broadest access to airline content as you can because that's the milk in the grocery store that you can attach a hotel to. It's very simple for them. And the other advantage that online travel agencies had was they were built as technology companies from ground up. They have the staff, they have the teams to go develop the technology required because unlike the old cable box and Disney Plus, it takes a lot more than just a TV to work with NDC. You've got, as a travel agency, you need lots of components and they all have to tie into a central system to be able to consume and work with that content in a way that's consumer friendly. So they actually had the ability to pull all that off. If you think about the corporate side of the market, very different story. The bigger corporate travel agencies in the world, not built from ground up as technology companies, for the most part, came from an era where everybody depended upon the GDSs as the center of their architecture. And also importantly, corporate travel agencies, the biggest ones, are paid more money by the GDSs than they are anyone else. And so if you're a corporate travel agency, it's not so much a controversy, but a reality of life that you don't come equipped with the ability to really build your own tech stack from ground up. You don't come with the nimbleness to be able to simply take the GDS out of the center of your business and replace it with something else. And you've got this stream of cash flow that you're just not going to walk away from because you do depend upon the GDSs for money. You do depend more upon air for money than the typical online travel agency does. And you're in a lot of ways, you're just kind of stuck. And so that can certainly represent itself. It can come out as a controversy because you've got airlines that still want to move on with the new technology. And you've got the corporate world saying, but hey, wait, this is how we do business. And our customers are telling us they want to keep doing business largely in the same way. So how do we bridge this gap?
And I guess the end result for, or the output of all of this to the consumer is they might find different pricing depending upon what channel they go to. Whereas in the past, there was pretty much price parity, right?
That's right. So pretty much what ends up happening in today's world is if you're a consumer that's shopping online, whether it's directly with airline.com or through a big online travel agency like Expedia or Google's what they call a meta search engine, you're getting really broad access to airline content. It's less likely that you're going to see a difference between those channels, which largely are using the new technology underneath, versus what an airline is putting out there through supplier.com. However, if you then you're then traveling for business and you're shopping through the travel agency that your company requires you to shop through, or the booking tool that your company requires you to shop through, it's actually much more likely that you're going to see gaps in airline fares between those systems and airline.com for two reasons. One reason is in today's world, airlines have started to mark up the fares that they make available through those legacy technology channels for strategic reasons. And secondly, the new technology also supports a new kind of pricing, which airlines call continuous pricing. But really, the way to think about that is it's just a real time fare that's calculated in the moment, at that moment, for that shop, for that customer. And it could only exist for that one customer in that one shop. And so an airline can be really granular in the price points that it puts out through those modern channels, and that's another reason why there could be differences, especially between corporate channels and online channels.
So this is really interesting. There's some controversy in the fact that the airlines pushed this technology out there, even though some distributors said we're not ready for it, don't even want it, right? So there was some of that. But there's also a strategy in here in what you're saying, I believe, for airlines to be looking at new channels to distribute versus these old legacy channels, and particularly direct to their customers. So we see a lot more now about airline frequent flyer programs and the benefits of booking directly with an airline. Isn't that the trend, Cory?
Yeah, that's a bigger trend that we're probably just at the beginning of. If you look at airline financial results, especially over the last few years post pandemic, their loyalty programs can, in some cases, produce 15 to 20% of their top line. And that's most of, if not all, the margin that airlines make as businesses. Flying the metal around, that's not a very profitable business. Putting a credit card in your pocket, that's a profitable business for airlines. And they make a lot of money from their credit card partners in particular that purchase the miles to reward the customers for their spending behavior on those credit cards. And airlines love that. So going forward, airlines are going to be thinking through all of the elements of their commercial strategy and thinking how all of the elements can support the growth of their frequent flyer programs. And so airline distribution strategies are no exception. So airlines are going to be thinking more and more, how do I deepen the relationship with that individual traveler? How do I make a higher percentage of them members of my frequent flyer program? And of those that join, how do I ensure that more and more of them are putting my credit card in their pocket?
Yeah, it's certainly a different business than it was 20 years ago, for sure. And I'll just tell you from a practical experience, I looked up a flight. This has been maybe a year ago now, um, and looked it up on one of our sites and found a fare. And I had a bunch of points to spend with American Express, which is one of the larger travel companies in the world. And they had a pay with points program. So anyhow, I called American Express and said, "Hey, I want to be on this flight, and this flight with American actually, and the price is $500. I'm just making this up." And they said, "Yes, those flights are available, but it's $700." And I said, "No, I'm actually looking at the American Airlines site. It's $500." And come to find out that they did not even have the NDC content. After going through a few supervisors and trying to figure out why there was difference. So I mean, the bottom line to our end customer or our listeners, I should say, as a consumer, what would you suggest that they do when they're buying tickets for leisure travel?
Look, I always say, don't fight City Hall, and City Hall in this case is the airlines, and what they really want from you is your engagement in their loyalty program. And I think a lot of airlines are going to make it worth your while to um, to be registered with their program, to be somebody who collects miles either while you travel or through credit card spend. And so airlines are going to be opening up more ways effectively to game their own programs, because what they want is for travelers to be engaged directly with them. And so if you are someone who is flying on airlines and not registering with frequent flyer programs while you do that, you are probably leaving a lot of value on the table, because airlines are willing to pay for that value.
And they're also willing to kind of get you into a stupor of always going to a airline site to look at for travel, right? And that is something I would strongly discourage our listeners in doing, because you need to shop across the different airlines, because there can be some really dramatic pricing differences.
But there is something to be said, guys, for these airline loyalty programs. That's what they are. Um, and for building your points and building your status with a particular airline. I have to say, I've gone through an interesting journey with airlines personally, and I think a lot of our listeners will relate to this, where as I've built my status with airlines, I have felt very empowered by their frequent flyer programs and the benefit that I get from them. I like, the free premium seating, the upgrades occasionally, the premier access from United, the fast track in an airport, like on and on. The club access, they have built lots of value into these programs. The point you're making, Cory. Um, and yet, at the same time, I think that they have become very sophisticated in their yield management. I think the manipulation of the fares and the manipulation of the equipment, of changing the equipment that they use and having flights fly much more full than they used to, in my opinion. And finally, the new one that I've seen a lot lately, I'd be interested, Cory, if you have thoughts on this, is the cash plus points offers now. So used to be, okay, I'll take 30,000 points and I'll get a free ticket. Now they're offering these like, well, give us 30,000 points and we'll take a couple of $100 off the ticket. The ticket is still $1,200. They don't look like good deals, and yet I see them dangling a lot of this right now.
Yeah, and that cash plus points one is a really interesting one, because from an airline's perspective, what's going through their minds is one of two things. One is some people like to mix their currency on a ticket purchase, and when they use the currency, the airline can effectively give a worse conversion rate effectively. So on a cash plus miles ticket, if you really do the math as a customer, you'll probably figure out pretty quickly the amount of cents per mile that you're redeeming for is a worse deal than if you were to redeem the entire ticket on miles. The other thing that airlines are thinking through that is a little bit less sinister and more customer centric is, if you think about it, most of the world's population is flying once every 18 months, plus or minus or less. There are a lot of, I think American some years ago now said that something like 87% of their travelers were flying every 18 months or less. The other 13% were flying more than that, and the split of revenue was about half and half. So half of the revenue was coming from the 87%. In the 87%, there are a lot of people who are never going to fly enough to reach the lowest level elite tier. And there are a lot of people who are not going to accumulate enough miles to redeem for an entire ticket. But an airline still wants to try to keep those people engaged, because there's a gap between the moment that a person signs up for the frequent flyer program and the moment that they make that lowest level elite frequent flyer status tier. And so that cash plus miles option gives the airline another hook to try to keep as many of those introductory flyers with them as possible, so that they can grow them up into that lowest level frequent flyer status person in the future, which is both good for the airline and good for the customer.
I've also found an interesting, we talk about leisure travel and that sort of trend of blending business and leisure travel. And that's where the cash plus miles model has worked for me because I'm a responsible business guy, right? And so I look and there is a, a fair price for my itinerary that I need to fly, but I want to choose a higher class of service that's going to cost more, or I want to choose more convenient times for me, or I want to stay over a couple of extra days, and that changes the fare. So what because I'm a responsible guy and I believe in corporate and business compliance when it comes to travel, I have bought down my little bit of extra expensive fare to the fair market price using my personal miles and then let the business pay the remainder. So that's been an interesting solution for me.
And very charitable of you to do as well. I'm impressed.
I'm that kind of guy.
Especially with post-tax money or post-tax benefit. Well, great. So, Cory, we also like to end our interviews or our time together, not interviews, with our guests to see if there's any tips that you might have for our listeners out there, whether it be something to do with airline pricing or just maybe a way that you make it through the airport quicker, or you're able to choose a hotel or a cruise, and I know I'm putting you on the spot because I didn't prep you with this. But is there any kind of sage advice that you could pass on to our listeners? Maybe a tip on how to travel better?
Yeah, maybe I'll make this one a little bit targeted, just to clue the listener in to how the airline strategist thinks about how to compete for business. Uh, if you are an airline in a market where either you have the most capacity by far of any airline, you've got the most flights. So American in Dallas, good example. American in Charlotte, a good example.
Better example.
Or if you're an airline that is just so tiny in a market that your flights almost don't matter. There's nothing you could do to compete for more business because you just simply don't have the flight schedule to support it. In either of those cases, the airline isn't particularly motivated to invest in a lot of sales programs or frequent flyer incentives or whatever it is to fight for market share in that market. Where an airline can fight the hardest is in toss-up markets. And the classic toss-up markets in the United States are New York, Los Angeles. Chicago is an absolute bloodbath for most airlines. If you are a customer in any of those toss-up markets, it's in your interest to try to split your loyalty between two airline programs to the extent that you can. And the reason why I say two is because it's impossible to maximize your frequent flyer status and all those things across 10 airlines. You're going to have to pick the two that work the best for you. But don't consolidate to just one because airlines are so motivated to lavish you with the riches of miles and frequent flyer status, and your company with discounts, and your travel agency with discounted fares and all that sort of stuff in those markets. And so don't be the traveler in a toss-up market that gets really loyal to one airline and shops on supplier.com exclusively for that airline. You're leaving a lot of value on the table by not thinking a bit more broadly about splitting between two airlines. And then also, because you're splitting between two airlines, keep your mind open to shopping outside of supplier.com as well to make sure you're getting absolutely the best benefits.
That's great advice. And I do have a follow-up question that came to my mind when you were saying this. From being a previous airline executive, is it true that if you anonymize your IP address, that you could potentially, as a consumer, that you could potentially receive better pricing?
I don't think so, because most airlines know that if they were ever to use a customer's personal information to give them a worse offer than they otherwise would have received, that will be the last time they've made an offer like that. and it will cause them a lot more trouble than optimizing that one transaction was worth. And so, my view of the world, and a lot of airlines share this perspective, is if a customer is identifying themselves, it can only result in a better offer.
So let me ask you this as a follow up to my follow up. If I search for a fare on carrier A from the United States, and then I hop on to a VPN and search from France for that same fare, is there a possibility I will get a different price?
On the supplier's own website?
On airlines, yeah, the airline side, yeah.
Probably not. On the airline's website, where you get into differences in airline pricing between points of sale is when it comes to indirect channels. So indirect means the airline's not selling through its own channel, it's selling through a network of travel agencies. And there could be any number of things that's happening in between the airline and the end customer in a foreign point of sale. So there could be a reason related to the GDS that the travel agency is using, reason related to the travel agency themselves. It could be any number, some sort of partner issue that's happening because there's a combination of flights that are combining just a certain way. So there are a lot of factors in foreign points of sale that can really mess up the fair search results in indirect channels.
Well, look, Cory, clearly you've got the keys to something that the rest of the world finds very challenging to understand and to optimize. You're a good guy to know. You're also CEO of Garner, which is an advisory to travel sellers, to airlines, to corporate travel departments, and so on in the industry. So I'm sure you're a guy I know in high demand for your expertise in this area. So thank you for spending a few minutes with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, you've been a great guest. It's been a learning experience for myself, and the time that I got to meet you in person, I learned a lot that day as well. So hopefully we will be able to get you to come back on No Tourist Allowed. And thanks so much for being here today.
Absolutely. We'll be back anytime you want. Thanks.
Thanks, Cory.
Wow, what an interesting guy, um, an intelligent guy.
Yeah. And we kind of had to keep it simple for our audience because most of our audience are not necessarily travel professionals, but Cory's deep, deep knowledge and understanding of a very complex industry is incredible. For us, from our audiences end, what do we see? Lots of expensive fares, lots of crowded airports and airplanes, and we don't really understand why all that happens. Complex offers, credit cards, everything, and we don't understand why.
Yeah, different pricing in different places because we're just used to having the price was the price, and you could get it. You know, before online, you get it at a travel agency, or you could walk up to the ticket counter. But yeah, things have changed.
So we'll keep Cory on the list and make sure he comes back and continues to help us all understand. But Mike, we are just back from Italy, as we mentioned at the top of the show, and we had some really great experiences when we were there. We were at a conference, of course, so lots of business and all that, but we were at a beautiful hotel, the Hilton Sorrento Palace up on the hill overlooking Sorrento. And I must be the biggest hotel property in Sorrento. There were
Oh,
beautiful, right? By
yeah, I
far.
think by far. Yeah, yeah.
Beautiful gardens and to walk through lemon groves. Lemons in this part of Italy look like grapefruits. Um, the tennis courts, pools, a big conference facility, um, just beautiful, beautiful property. And then you walk down a couple of blocks into beautiful Sorrento, into the old walled city portion, the center of Sorrento, all of which sits atop a cliff overlooking the ocean. And if you're hardy, like Mike and I are, you make your way down the steps, down through the old medieval alleyways to the marinas at the bottom, and what they call the beach, but the beach is actually rocks and jetties and docks that people sunbathe on and jump into the water. In Sorrento itself, there really isn't a beach per se. Nearby, there are black volcanic beaches, like in the whole rest of this area, because right across the bay, what you're looking at all day long is Vesuvius, the famous volcano that destroyed Pompeii in was it 49 AD, I believe. So during the Roman times, Vesuvius is right there in the middle of your view. And we made our way down to the marina one day. I had lunch down on the water there and saw a balcony um, overlooking the marina where Sophia Loren, the famous Italian actress, filmed a movie in Sorrento, and a scene in that movie, which is called uh, Bread, Love, and there's a scene in the movie where she appears on this balcony, has a whole thing on the balcony, and so there's a plaque. It's not an ancient church, it's not a Roman statue, it's a balcony where Sophia Loren was did a scene. So they really love her there. But Mike, you and we had some interesting experiences in Sorrento.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, I certainly will go back there again, but a very sharp cliff into the water, which makes for a very dramatic view. And you know, in the old town, there's plenty of restaurants and bars and
Great shopping.
yeah, really good shopping, high end as well as touristy kind of shopping, and lots of old churches to go visit, and museums as well. So, wonderful place to go, and highly recommend it. You have the choice of either flying into Naples, and it's about an hour and 20-minute drive, hour
Mm-hmm.
and 15-minute drive, depending on the traffic, or you can fly into Rome, and it's about a 2.5-hour drive. You might want to consider taking a train if you go into Rome.
Yes.
And there's a lot more service into Rome than there is to Naples. I happened to catch a nonstop flight out of Philadelphia. So I flew to Philadelphia and then flew
I
back.
flew nonstop also from Newark in New York area.
Yeah.
Right into Naples. But the train does come right into the center square in Sorrento. So I do know people who went that way. One of the first nights, Mike, we donned aprons and hairnets. And what did we do?
We made some pizzas. We were taught how to make pizzas, which turned into throwing flour and throwing dough amongst the
Yeah, it was
others.
a bit like the food fight scene from Animal House. People were tossing dough balls back and forth, but it was fun, great fun. And Mike and I caught a few nice meals on our own, plus the big banquet things that we were attending with like 600 people. But even one of those was in the oldest restaurant in Sorrento from the 1840s. And you walk into this little stucco, very traditional looking Neapolitan restaurant, not realizing that right out the back of it, these Roman ruins and lemon groves, and we had 600 people there.
Yeah, and
Right?
an all glass ceiling. It looked like a big greenhouse.
Right. And
Yeah.
twinkling lights in the lemon groves. I mean, really, really lovely. Mike and I pre-gamed one of the dinners. We thought we'd have a little snack. I wanted to order the small charcuterie board, but Mike pushed for the medium, and this groaning board of meats and cheeses.
Like
came to
a
the
grazing
table.
board would be a more appropriate thing.
It could have served 6 of us, but we stuck it out. We pretty much finished it.
And it was funny. There's a little tourist. We were kind of out on the main road and there were tourists coming by, and they would look at this huge grazing board of food, and they would stick their eye at that, and they wanted to take a picture so bad. I caught a couple of them kind of acting like they were taking a picture of the restaurant, and then they would flip the phone down and take a picture of our board. Um, so I didn't know if it was us being famous or if it was people taking a picture of our board, but I'm pretty sure it was the board.
I have to say, it was so big we did give up towards the end of it, but we had the help of two dogs on the street there who I fed quite a bit of mortadella to try to empty the board a little bit. Listen, we had some great wine too. That's one of the wonderful things in this area. And the Amalfi Coast includes Positano right nearby, and Amalfi, very, very beautiful other towns there. Sorrento is very, very popular with the UK and Irish market. I think Positano is probably more well known to Americans, but they're all beautiful. We had some great wine, including wine from the slope of Vesuvius right across the bay. The volcanic ash makes great grapes, and the famous wine there is called Lacrima Christi, the tears of Christ. And it comes in red or white, and it's absolutely delicious. It's been a favorite of mine for a long time. I also, at one of the restaurants, I ordered the local dish, uh, the local pasta preparation, which is called Nerano, and it is courgettes or like zucchini and cheese. That's it, in a spaghetti with zucchini and cheese. It's absolutely delicious.
Yeah, there was some mighty fine food there, and I look forward to getting back and enjoying more of that very soon. But that'll about wrap us up for today, James. Thank you guys for listening, and we appreciate your loyalty, and look forward to bringing you more podcasts. And you can always find our past podcast at No Tourists Allowed. You can subscribe wherever you get your podcast, and please, if you like it, please share this with your friends.
I think we should name this episode after the famous folk song from that part of the world called Torno Sorrento. There's a great recording of Luciano Pavarotti singing it, so you should look it up. But it's one of the great Italian folk. This area is known for music. Caruso was from Naples. So we Torno Sorrento, return to Sorrento, and return to No Tourists Allowed. We'll see you next time.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.